You are listening to the Elemental Podcast.
Shut up!
To my mind. My name is Alan Nichols, and you're listening to the Elemental Podcast. This is entry number 120. Glorious purpose. I've been watching Loki, obviously, and I'm in love with the series. I'm in love with the story. It's not just about it being a Marvel, property, right? Part of the cinematic universe. Even though I'm a fan, a lot of times I really appreciate good storytelling. And that's what they've done with Loki. I find that I'm there less for the Easter eggs and the things that a lot of times you go back for, right? I think people watch these things because they want to make sure that they're caught up with the next Marvel movie, And, but I'm not just watching it for that. Like, that's fun. And that's an interesting insight about where they're going, obviously. But I'm very interested in the story of Loki themselves. Use the term themselves because Loki is a they, them, gender fluid, non-binary. And that comes into play in the series, definitely. But they're such an interesting character. And seeing all the different iterations, no spoilers, won't give anything away. Just, putting that out there. I'm just giving kind of an oversight of the entire series, without any specific details. But you see a Loki who has failed, who is the loser, who is the villain. And now you see Loki in a different way. You see Loki grow. You see Loki change. And that change and that growth makes sense. And it follows a progression. And if you really think about it, you can start to apply that same growth and this same thought process to your own life. The term glorious purpose is something that Loki has said many times before. They believe that they are bigger and badder and smarter and more powerful than everyone else. But this is also an insecurity. This is a projection. Loki wants to control because Loki is afraid. Loki is afraid of being alone. Loki is afraid of not being loved. And because it's something that Loki doesn't understand how to have in their life, they often, do things that are bad for attention, It's an interesting story. It really is. And I love Marvel for this too. With their villains, they don't make them just kind of sinister and evil. They're complex. And there's very few that you'll see that you're ever just like able to completely just write them off. Like Killmonger, great example in Black Panther. Killmonger is a complex character. And yes, Killmonger does very sinister, things, right? Evil things. But there's justification, just like the justifications that a lot of people have for the things that they do. And there's a sense to it all. No one's just purely the good guy or the bad guy, like Iron Man. Best example ever. Tony Stark is a billionaire creep for the most part, and in a certain perspective, but they've gone through this process of self-realization and a personal revolution, and you watch that progress, and that's amazing to watch. But you also have to understand that, like, anytime I watch these shows and I hear about, like, in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, hearing about how Sam Wilson can't get a loan because he's not really paid by the Avengers, and that's not really the way it works, and it's goodwill and stuff like that. I mean, it's kind of like, holy shit, like, where is Stark? And I mean, even though he's, not around anymore. Spoiler alert if you didn't know that from like 2 years ago. But yeah, it's still interesting, like, why weren't these people really taken care of? I mean, but in a way it makes sense, but still it starts to bring to light that it's something I've actually enjoyed about the Spider-Man movies. Spider-Man is always dealing with something Tony Stark has done. So it's not like Spider-Man did it or Peter Parker did it, caused people to be put out, but he's still having to clean up someone else's mess. How true is that of life? So anyway, with Loki, that's where Loki is. Loki has this moment of self-realization and sees what they really are, but sees also potential. And it's also a story. And when you watch it, this will make even more sense. But, Loki starts to actually love themselves, right? And that's kind of a beautiful thing. The way that they depict that is amazing. So, it's more than just someone being noble and being good. It's someone who, I don't know, is becoming healthy, right? So I love that part of the story more than the mystery and, the TVA and everything that they've brought into the show, which are amazing, by the way. But that's the thing I've really focused in on. It's a story about someone kind of falling in love with themselves. And that's like, okay, yeah, he's a narcissist, of course, or they're a narcissist rather. But it's like, okay, but no, it's more complex than that. And to be a narcissist, you can say that that person really loves themselves, but that's a false idea of what love is, right? And also, it's more complicated than that. It really is. And I like the way that the show depicts that. It tears down the character to his very core, and then it rebuilds. So I've been thinking a lot about that in my own life, about purpose. Right? Loki comes into everything thinking glorious purpose and then realizes, well, I mean, my purpose is shit. My purpose is to lose and to fail. And this is the path that I'm destined to be on. But for my own life, I realized that there was a moment in time, especially when I was a young Christian, where I felt that way too, glorious purpose. Or a divine purpose, rather. And I didn't think it was better than other people or, have that narcissistic, complex around it. But I definitely was motivated in my life and maybe achieved many of the things that I did because I thought I had some sort of supernatural backing. And then one day, after years and years of struggling with belief, right? Because even though it was complicated for me, that was one thing that was easier for me to accept. Maybe because it was something I needed to accept. I needed to believe that there was a purpose for everything that I was going through and that it was worth the struggle because of this purpose. And that purpose often was told to me like, people saw it early on. I was very the word genius, creative, those two words often kind of flooded my head. And I don't know. I mean, I always struggled with that too, because I'm like, no, I'm really not and I never really trusted people's critiques of my work because even though, I know they were being supportive and they weren't necessarily lying, I really wasn't looking at them like, you're a really good judge of that. And I've seen other people too, like falter, right, where they would buy into the ego boosting that people would give them. And I wrote that off. Now, from the last entry you heard that I've not redefined, but I have reevaluated that thought. Because maybe that's not really the case. Maybe actually that ego boosting is good. You need your ego boosted. I mean, not overinflated, but you do need it, because otherwise you get into a pattern of self-deprecation and you take for granted what you have, what you can do. And then you stop believing you even have the ability to do those things. But early on in my life, when I was in those Christian years and people saw that talent, they manipulated me, right? That's really what it is, right? When someone says you have a purpose and a destiny given to you by God, that's manipulation. And that's because they want you to stay a part of the faith. They want to control that, right? They want to control what you do too. And many times people tell you things like that because they know that it will flatter you, that it's kind of love bombing, and also, that it may serve their purposes. And it did. For many, many years when I was in that world, I did a lot of work. And sure, I can say today that, a lot of those things that I did built up into a talent that I use today outside of that world, but it doesn't really justify the things that people put me through and the fact that I was taken advantage of. In spite of all of that, I made something of it, but not because of it. Because the truth is that as I've lived my life and I understand now that, look, I don't have a belief in God. I don't have a belief in spirituality or religion or many different things. And it's not like me fighting off that, and mentally like choosing like, no, I don't believe it. There's no evidence that I've ever seen. And what I do know is that any time in my life that I've decided to do something, then I've done it. But, I also thought like maybe this idea of purpose is an outdated concept. It's something that you need when you are a religious person. But now I'm rethinking that. Maybe purpose is something that we all need, that is essential to our life. And it feels odd as a non-religious person to say you have purpose. I mean, maybe not. Maybe that's not a correct statement either. It feels odd to me. Let me say that. And I think that has to do a lot with my perspective about where I come from, about how purpose was used as a tool to keep me enslaved in a religion that I always fought with, that I was always, in some ways, many ways, rejected by, but also used when it was convenient for someone to use it. And so purpose is complicated. Like I've always kind of refused it, like a lot of things, but now I'm thinking, well, purpose may be essential because with all the years that I had that idea of purpose, I accomplished a lot, but I accomplished a lot, right? Maybe I can say that, well, because I had this belief that there was a power behind me thrusting me forward, that it gave me the ability to achieve the things that I did. But, maybe, obviously, like I still accomplished those things and there was no power behind me. So what was that? Is purpose a tool for the weak-minded? I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, maybe there was a point I did, but I don't know if I agree with that now. And the bigger question that has kind of crossed my mind is, am I still actually holding on to the idea that I have a purpose? Even though, I'm not a religious person anymore, and I don't believe in God, and I'm an atheist, right? So, kind of said all the same thing there 3 times over, just to make it clear. But am I still holding on to the idea of purpose? Like, do I still do what I do with this idea that I'm purposed, I'm destined to do it? And if I am, then I guess I've made my own purpose. Do I need to change that? Do I need to veer away from that? Do I need to get away from the ideas of purpose in my life? Well, as I've broken that down and as I've thought about that more carefully, I realized, no, purpose is still serving me. Why would I remove something that's serving me because it has a conflict with past religious ideas? Really, like many things, purpose was taken over by religion and redefined, and they basically, claim exclusive copyright over the idea or intellectual property rights over the idea of purpose, but it's not theirs. They can't have it because purpose is something that maybe isn't assigned by God. But why can't you assign purpose to yourself? I think we're afraid to really do that because maybe we'll think that people think of us as, or they'll see us as a narcissist, or, that we think we're something special or grandiose or whatever. But I think that if you really want to accomplish great things in life, then I think it's really hard to do. Not impossible, mind you, but I think it's really hard to do without this sense of purpose, that this is your purpose. This is what, in a way, you were born to do. So maybe it's not something that, you're handed to by a god or a creator, but is it okay for you to hand that to yourself? I'm going to give you permission right now and just say, yeah. I mean, my opinions on this are still forming. This isn't something that I have been thinking about for a very long time. The thoughts are still very recent, within the last few months. But you know what? I really do genuinely believe that purpose is something that you can give yourself. If you've ever watched the series Battlestar Galactica, the new one, or newer one, back from like the 2000s, one thing that I really remember, like that stands out very clear to me about that series, was after all of the colonies are destroyed, and it's just that ship of survivors on the Battlestar Galactica. You have not Admiral, but you have Captain Adama, right? Is he Captain at the time? I don't even remember. He eventually becomes Admiral Adama. But anyway, he looks on to the crowd of all those people, and he sees these people lost and struggling. They've lost everything. Their homeworlds have been destroyed by this threat that, they thought was gone, and then reemerged in a very different way, more advanced than they could possibly imagine. But their worlds are gone, and they're at perceivably, they're at the end of their civilization. They had an apocalyptic event. And so Adama gets up there, Edward James Olmos, and he tells all these people, that we're going to keep going and we're going to move on. And then he says this thing that, makes people excited. He says, all the captains and all the people in a position of power know of the secret 13th colony. And that 13th colony is called Earth. And we're going there. And everyone gets excited because all of a sudden they have a new thing to live for. They have a new purpose. And one of the characters asked him, is like, is that real? And he's like, these people need something to believe. Let it be Earth. And that's how these people keep moving on. Instead of this idea that they're lost, that there's no hope, they have a sense of hope now. And it's a false sense of hope, right? But they don't know that. But it does allow them to continue on. And maybe in our lives, when things get so difficult, we need that sense too. We need to trick our own minds. I've always had this idea that maybe tricking your own mind is not a good idea, right? Because you can do that so much where you get to a point where, I don't know, that you can be completely fooled by yourself. I've seen it happen. I've done it to myself. But as I've been learning more about ADHD and finding ways to trick my own mind to get things done, right? Like the tricks are something I'm working in cooperation with. It's not like a complete deception where I don't really know what's going on. It's that my mind works in a particular way. And I understand that sometimes you have to work around those obstacles, to be able to achieve what you want to get done. There's a few tricks, right? Simple stuff like, folding laundry. This is something that I see a lot of people talk about with ADHD. Start doing it and you get bored. You lose, like you don't want to do it, so you never do it. You end up with a pile of clothes. What do you do to kind of like mentally discipline yourself when you don't have a correctly function executive, ability in your brain, like executive function? Well, one of the things is that you can just trick your brain by saying, just fold one piece of like clothing. Just fold one piece of clothing and that's it. That's all you have to do. And you get up and you do that and goes, right, like they're begrudgingly like, fine, I'm just going to do one piece. And then it's like, well, since you're here, you might as well, and that's how you kind of trick yourself to do these tasks. It sounds ridiculous. It really does. Like, how do you do that? How do you really trick yourself? This has been working. I swear to God, or swear to whatever out there in the universe, I swear that this has actually been working. And not just for laundry, but for work stuff. The other day, I was like, you know what? You don't have to do a full illustration. You just have to sit down and you just got to get something done. Like just even the basic silhouette. Just get the basic silhouette done. And that's all you have to do today. That's all you have to do today if you get that. And I sat down and I was working on a new Harley Quinn pin design, because, the new movie's coming out and there's a new iteration of the character that I really love and wanted to do something with. And there I was. I sat down and I did that. And sure enough, within 3 hours, I finished the piece. I finished the work. That's a record for me. I don't know if I've ever finished a character illustration that fast before. With my method, the way that I do things, and usually the way that I stop during the process and I'm like evaluating it, I've never got something done like that before. And it's a good illustration too. I mean, it's one of my, better pieces of work for sure. So, I mean, I love that. I love that has worked. But I don't feel deceived. I don't feel like I betrayed myself, right? Like sometimes you do kind of have to trick yourself mentally. And since I've been doing that, it has made me think like, well, maybe all along that's what I've been doing too. Maybe not acknowledging it, maybe pretending like that's not really the case, or maybe thinking like, well, because of years and years and years of believing this and doing this, I have got to this place where my mind just kind of works this way and I continue doing art because I love doing it. But is that really the case? Or am I just accepting that to be the truth? And I really couldn't tell you for sure. I really don't know. But I have this sneaking suspicion that what's happening is that I still have this belief, this something beyond me that gives me power to do what I do. And I feel foolish for saying it because, I know better, right? For all the information I have, I know better. But in this particular matter, this is what I choose to believe. And you know me, I'm not a person who likes beliefs. I like ideas. But I find that this still serves me, that this thing works. And at least it's not me like, the fine line that, you have to be careful not to cross is who are you trying to appease? Are you trying to live up to your own standards, your own goals? You're trying to live out your own dreams, or are you trying to appease some sort of, I don't know, deity, right? Like you're trying to appease God or Jesus or whatever other fictional character or whatever you want to come up with. It's like, no, you have to be doing that for yourself. Because look, years and years and years of being a Christian, I mean, it's working for me practically as well, because like the one trap I didn't fall into is I also knew that to do the things that I wanted to do, I couldn't have this like, while I'm waiting on God's time to learn this knowledge, to gather these skills, to get these opportunities. I never did that because I saw my family do it. I saw people around me do it. I saw an entire community of people wasting their lives away, doing things that I deemed to be just a waste of time. And I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to fall into that trap. So I pushed myself. And I looked at things as like, the opportunities come and you have to accept them when they do. And sometimes the opportunities aren't as clear as you think they might be. And it was able, like during a time in my life where I had very little control of what I did, instead of always thinking about the things that I was forced to do, I tried to think like, how can this be applied to the things that I want to do? What can I pull from this? It's one of the reasons I think in life still today, I look at a lot of things and I try to get a good takeaway. That's why I say a lot, in spite of the things that I've been through, I still accomplished, not because of them, but in spite of them. And I think part of that was being able to have this understanding that the things that I was having to do weren't really going to get me there, right? Going to church all the time was not going to get me there. Sitting in a pew, listening to someone spew out sermons about various hate speech and groups of people we should hate, that wasn't going to get me there. But what did get me there was finding things to do while that was going on, getting on a camera, getting behind a soundboard, working in the drama department. Sure, I had to do a bunch of sketches and skits and stuff like that, that were absolutely ridiculous and very embarrassing to me today. But, it got me where I needed to go. It gave me something. And so I took away tools and skills from things that, if it was the thing itself that I was trying to derive value from or experience from, it would have given me nothing. I would have, none of that would be useful. Like my year in Bible college, how useful is that for me today? Very seldom. But you know what I try to do with that experience? I could just basically be spiteful, right? Not spiteful, but I could have like an attitude about the fact that I felt forced in a way, or manipulated, maybe not forced, but manipulated into Bible college. But I can look at it this way too. It gave me some unique insights into the Christian world that I wouldn't have had just being a member of a church. And I heard from people who we see all the time today on Right Wing Watch and other various news sources, that talk about the craziness that are coming out of the Christian world. All right. Well, those people they talk about, they were teaching classes at the Bible college that I was in. And we used their curriculums and we got personal insight. We didn't get the shit that they just shared out to people in pews. No, we got the shit that they were teaching, like what they did, the methodology behind it, the thought process. And sure, they were drinking their own Kool-Aid too. So when people say stuff like, all these people are just con artists. No, I genuinely believe the shit that they spewed, they genuinely do believe it's true. When they say something's from God, they really do believe it's from God because that's how delusional they are. I mean, this is where that entire process of purpose gets, way out of hand when you've assigned it to a form of delusion, and that gets basically there's a deep dark part of your mind that generates all of this stuff based off of your own biases and prejudice and fears, because that's what happens when you have this deity figure. Like if it's not real, right, it's not really feeding into your head. My thought is that, and I'm not saying this like this is a psychological fact or scientific even. It's just what I observe is that the well that comes from isn't from a good place. Right? Like sometimes there's good peppered in there, but a lot of it's motivated and inspired by fear and their own prejudice and the way they want to see the world. And in a way, going back to Loki, that's kind of what it is too, right? Like, that purpose that they feel like they have. And when they say these things, they do feel like God is speaking through them because they wouldn't know what to do with their lives if that wasn't true. Their sense of value, their sense of purpose all derives from this, but it comes from, like I said, a dark well, a place where only poison comes from it. So if right, like you're tapped into something more, well, you're tapped into yourself rather, and where it's coming from, you can purposely not poison the well. You can put good stuff back out into the world too with this same idea of purpose. So anyway, we'll get back to that. That's the thought that I want to explore there too. But look, so in that world, I got to see those people. I got to hear their thought process. And look, a lot of people would say that's not very valuable information to have unless, you're reporting. But I have found it to be very valuable when I examine a lot of people who come into my life. I've said many times, my family are very much believers to this day, and I actually do have a good relationship with them. But part of that is understanding why they think and believe the things that they do. And when other people are unable to have relationships with their religious family or conservative families because they get so distanced from that and they don't understand where they're coming from, I understand where that comes from. I also understand that you can be a positive influence in the middle of all of that too. And if you're willing to have the patience and you're willing to explore and talk things out, and maybe if you can circumvent the process and enter yourself in a way that doesn't feel, obtrusive or doesn't feel what's the word I'm looking for? Like it doesn't feel confrontational, then you can actually find a way to have true discourse. And it's amazing. It works. It really does work. But because of that information, that knowledge that I have, right? Because like, look, that knowledge I was supposed to get was supposed to train me to be a missionary or a prophet or a pastor or some sort of religious position. But instead, what it gave me is unique insight into a world that I'm able to speak back into. When I've done this podcast, even, that's where I find those skills come in very handy, is having that special insight. And when people have reached out to me from that religious world, you know, I have been able, sometimes it's because of the things that I say. And while others can look at things and easily mock, because genuinely some things just should be mocked, right? Like it makes sense. And that's not a criticism on anyone for mocking them. But when you've been on the inside and you know why people think and say the things that they do, and you're able to relate that in a way that, you know, that people hear and they're like, oh, it can hit them in a different way, right? Because you're not making fun of them, right? You're not calling them an idiot for believing the things that they do or the things that they've said. You're approaching it in such a way where you're using that in your favor. So look, like I said, I have found all of these things in my life have been useful in one way or another. And even though the defined thing that I was supposed to get out of it, maybe that's not what I really got out of it. Maybe it was the side benefit. The other thing about being in Bible college, and I've said this 100 times, is that I got to spend a lot of time with editing equipment and video cameras and computers, and all of that allowed me to be able to grow in the things that I really wanted to do. And the other side benefit is, you know, part of my problem with like social anxiety and really being like in the middle of a group of people and feeling very awkward. All right, well, being in the middle of a bunch of people screaming in tongues, it definitely makes it easier to be in the crowd of people it just happens to be a crowd of people, right? But they're not acting insane. And so it makes life a little bit more manageable. Doesn't mean that like everything is just made easy for me now, you know, but still, like I have some perspective and I've been in places that have been a lot scarier, and I can remind myself of that too. There are moments where I go to a club and I really wanted to go to the club, and then I get at the club and then I'm there and there's all the goth people around because I'm going to goth clubs. And, you know, and I'm a goth, you know, and I'm standing there, but I feel awkward. I feel out of place. I feel alien, like I don't really know what to do. And then I can remind myself, you know, you used to feel this way too in the religious world, and you really were alien. You really didn't belong. And you really did see kind of through the matrix, you know, you saw all the code and all of the craziness going on, and, you know, you wanted to get out, but you found a way to survive and even thrive there, right? This is nothing. You know, yes, your feelings are real, but if you were able to overcome that, you are definitely able to overcome this. So, yes, having this sense of purpose in my life is strange because it doesn't come from a religious place. It comes from me. I have self-assigned purpose. And even though I know it comes from me, like, I think that's why it's very important too. This ties into what I was talking about last time. This is why it's very important as well to build yourself up and not, you know, just tear yourself down, not be always self-deprecating. I think it's okay occasionally, you know, but you need to understand that you're also, if there is no God, whether you believe there's a God or not, right? But you can't, if you believe there's a God, then why are you tearing down what God has given you? Okay, that should be your perspective. You shouldn't want to destroy and diminish everything that you can do. You've worked hard for that. You know, it'd be very easy to look at a bunch of other people and say, well, their work's better in this and that, and you can't really receive a compliment. You have to work that out. That's not just a personality trait, like something quirky, that's you. No. You have to work that out. You have to get to a point where you're comfortable accepting those compliments because, you know, accept it and believe it to be true. Take it. Why not? You know, I mean, it's different if you're dealing with an overbloated sense of ego, but, you know, that's not as common And especially if you're listening to this podcast, I have a sneaking suspicion that you are more like me, right? Where you have a real confidence problem sometimes. Where you feel like, yes, you've done these things, but you really undersell your own achievements. You know, it's okay to be confident. It's not ego. It's called confidence. And when people come up around you and want to celebrate the things you've done, accept it. You know, as I said early on, that I would have these people come into my life and celebrate these achievements and make a big deal out of them. And I would like look at it and say, well, you know, you're not, you're being nice, or your family. But, you know, I've said this about my mom, and it's something I've always appreciated. And sometimes she hears it and she's like, oh God, like, cause she feels bad, but I loved it. I really do. And it's something I still love to this day. She didn't celebrate every dumb piece of macaroni art I brought home, you know, and she could have, sure. But you know what she did celebrate? She celebrated when I actually did some impressive shit, or I showed potential in something, you know, and she didn't tear me down either. My mom was not, I mean, my mom has her flaws, obviously. We've talked about them, but that's where she didn't fuck up. It is one of the biggest reasons I am who I am today. She didn't fuck up there. She really didn't. She gave me a sense of a person that I could be, that I had real potential. And because I valued her opinion, because I actually thought she was being genuine, not just being my mom, it actually helped boost my self-esteem. And, you know, my mom has very rarely in her life or my life tried to take advantage of that too. Even being in the Christian world and all that manipulating, like, she's never really tried to take advantage of that. You know, we look back and there's things that you forget, but my mom always tried to honor me in some way. If I did something for her, she always tried to compensate me and you know, like, really actually gave me genuine criticism when it needed it. You know, but not like destructive, but like, you know, have you thought about doing this? Just the other day, I'm sitting down, I'm talking to my mom. I'm talking about my business, and there's been a thought that I've had that maybe I should help other businesses, you know, with their, you know, branding needs or business, right? Like, I used to want to cast off this responsibility to ship products and do the things that I do, but that has changed. I actually really appreciate that part of the business. And I also understand, and having had issues in the past, working with a partner who handles one part of your business can be tricky and maybe dangerous, because they might feel like they're more important than they actually are, or maybe they just start siphoning money, you know, because of their own personal needs, and it can get tricky. And if clear boundaries aren't defined, things happen. I don't have a great history with that. Doesn't mean I always, you know, it will always be that way, but I also realized, like, the reason that's happened is because there was always an insecurity I had, and I brought someone in to handle the things that I was insecure about. But in doing so, there came conflict. And that will be something that I will be breaking down with my therapist for a very long time. But regardless of really if that's all on me, or if that's like a shared responsibility, whatever, it doesn't matter. What I know is I'm glad I did finally say, no, I know I'm insecure about this, but I'm going to try to find out more, and I'm going to be willing to make mistakes and grow and learn, and not pretend like I know what I'm doing, but actually listen to people and try to figure this out. And as a result, I've figured out like how to really run a business. I have for the first time in a very long time, like a few years back, I was finally like, I've ran my own business and I've done so many things, but I never really got it legally like established. I have an LLC now, right? I mean, I'm filing legal, you know, paperwork and taxes and handling shipping costs and, you know, figuring out all of this stuff. I pay myself as an employee through my business. I mean, like, that's far more than I thought I'd ever be able to achieve. But I do all of that now, right? I have, you know, maybe not mastered it. I don't want to say that, but I've come a long way. And I had to do that because I was tired of failing constantly and finding myself in the same pattern, the same trap. I wanted to break free from that. I wanted to do better. I wanted to do better for the people in my life too, because, you know, oftentimes it would be people that I was friends with or I was close with who I'd bring into my business and the things that I do. And, you know, How many of those friendships are still around today? I know this, like I know that pattern. Don't do business with family or even friends. And here I am, I've made that mistake twice, and they've cost me a lot. And more than financial, good friendships, potential, growth. And I'm sorry I didn't learn that lesson earlier. I'm really sorry to them that I failed them too. Right? I mean, I used to always paint it like they failed me. No, I failed them. That was my fault, my responsibility to take on, and I didn't. I wasn't hiring an employee. I was hiring someone to come on and basically, do the work for me. Wish I hadn't done that. Wish I had, better maintained boundaries and understood. Like really delegate like responsibilities too. Have a real agreement. Used to veer away from contracts. I work in contracts now. Contracts are good. Contracts mean that you know what you're responsible for, what you've got to do. They legally protect you. And you think like, what's contracts amongst friends? Trust me, if you want to keep the friendship, write the contract, sign it, make sure everything is dotted, make sure the lawyers get involved. Do what you got to do. Save your friendship by being responsible. So yes, purpose, right? Purpose is, I don't know. I have a very different sense of what that word means now. And it can be self-assigned. And honestly, maybe it is your responsibility. I'm not saying to do this. I'm just saying it's worth a thought. It's worth some time really concentrating on this. Do you feel like you're getting as much done in your life? Do you feel like you're able to go further? Like I've seen people on the left like speculate, like why can't we go as far as people on the right? Like they're so dedicated and they're so passionate. And I mean, we see it work in a very negative way, but shit, they're powerful. They're in the minority and they're powerful. And they're still working as roadblocks, even when they're not in the positions of power. They still serve as roadblocks. So what is that? It's the power of belief. So you have to harness that power. You have to take it into your own hands. And you have to determine, like, what is it that you want to do with the rest of your life? And when you have that figured out, maybe you already do, maybe you don't. And even if you don't know what you want to do, you should still give yourself that purpose of like, there's power behind you, that belief that there is power behind you, even though when you know it's not true, like I said, your brain will believe a lot of different things, not truly like believe, but still you'll be a little surprised about like what you can actually achieve when you think, in that particular way. People walk around, differently when they feel like they have a destiny, when they know how things are going to turn out for them. We already know this to be true, like with psychological studies, but people who have a better outlook, especially when they're going into illness, usually have a better survival rate. So maybe it's a placebo effect, right? Like clearly it'd be a placebo effect, but it works. We know it to work. We know that it has, limitations as well. But if you can work it, work it. You got to work that, get it out there. What was that? But look, you've got to really just decide that you do have a purpose. That's the first step. I have a purpose. I have a purpose for being here. I'm not an accident. And trust me, there's plenty of things scientifically that you could read that will prove that otherwise. But you have to ignore that for your own benefit. Because while that may be the truth, while that may be the reality, you can give yourself a good purpose. I talked about this back on an episode that I called Synthetic Belief, the Church of Synthetic Belief. And, I still think it's very true. You can have these beliefs that are absolutely fake, but they can propel you. They can take you further than maybe you could just take yourself on your own. If it's, I know this too, like this is something I've started to learn with ADHD. We can go a lot further for others than we can for ourselves. Right? Like all of a sudden, these things that are so difficult for us to do on our own, someone needs help and we are there. We are active. We are getting it done. I used to fear like, oh my God, I won't be able to get these things done in my life. Like how will I ever make money? And then I'd find myself like coming up with $4 or $5 grand a month when other people needed it for other things. I got that shit done. How did I do that? Because it was always within my potential to do that. But for whatever reason, when it was on me to get it done for myself, I couldn't do it. But if you have the potential, you can find a way to unlock it to work for yourself. And in the process of making it work for yourself, you can also make that work for others too. I'll end with this. This last week, I got into this spree of cleaning the apartment. I love cleaning. I really do. I mean, getting into the cycle and the process of doing that can be very mentally taxing. And when I'm dealing with like my aunt's apartment, when I came into there, like there was really no space for me at all. And to cobble out a little space for me to be able to dwell in and have an office space was very hard to do. But for about a year, I've been living there. And yeah, we've done some cleaning here and there, but we've never done really organizing and finding like a new home for things and basically like getting rid of stuff, sending stuff to donation or selling stuff. We haven't been doing any of that really. But now, like, as I've been using these tools to better serve my life, learning how to better cope and deal with my ADHD, I'm getting to this place now where I finally am like wanting to adjust the environment that I'm in, and that's a good sign. Anytime in the past I've got into a mode of cleaning, it's a mental reflection, right? Like of what's going on up in my head. It means my life is starting to get straight and organized in my head. And that means that I want that to be present in the environment around me because that will better help me get things more clear and straight in my head. It's a feedback loop, right? It is a cycle that is beneficial, that is beneficiary for me, and I need to be in that. I'm sweating bullets right now. I don't have the air on in my car. And I'm literally soaking wet. Oh my God. Totally bone dry when I started. Now you can hear it. Oh my God. But look, doing that has been so good for me. And the benefit is it really helps my family too. I suspect that my family deals with a lot of the same mental illness and mental disorders that I have. And by doing this, it is helping them get shit done too. My aunt has been doing great, has been getting a lot of stuff done. We've been maintaining a level of clean and a level of not even just clean, but organization and also like productivity and all this stuff. We've been happier. Oh my God. My mom had this amazing reaction to what I did. Again, like, giving me genuine feedback. So from people like her, when she really praises what I've done, it means more. It really does. It's coming from a parent, and it has a side benefit of what I talked about with my mom already. She didn't just dole out compliments needlessly. Like there was a purpose behind it. And so when she saw the place and what I've done, she's just so appreciative and so proud and so appreciative. It means a lot. And that goes back into my head, and I'm able to recycle that into being more creative, feeling more confident, being more motivated. Like motivation is not something easy that comes to me, right? But I'm finding it more. I mean, there's this little well of motivation, and or maybe it's even just momentum. Maybe I don't know the difference, but it is helping me. It is serving me in a way that I can't truly really put into words how grateful I am to have this understanding. It all kind of starts with Loki. Weirdest thing. I really appreciate you joining me here on this entry of the podcast. And I'm going to leave you like this. Define your own purpose and escape the ordinary. Goodbye, everybody.
This concludes this entry of the Elemental Podcast. If you enjoyed today's show, head over to houseofl.com to gain access to our show notes, additional podcasts, the photo diary, and more. If you're feeling financially benevolent and would like to support this podcast, go to patreon.com/elemental, and for as little as $1 per entry, you'll get an ad-free version of this podcast, patron-only monthly live stream Q&As, and Elle's everlasting gratitude. Music was provided by Damn The With Siren, featuring the songs Big Mouth and Soft and Blue. All music was used with the artist's permission. If you want to hear more of their incredible music, go to damnthewitchsiren.com. For inquiries, questions, or lust letters, email info@lnichols.com or visit the contact page at houseofl.com. The Elemental Podcast is a subsidiary of House of L. Copyright 2019, all rights reserved.